Kim, what's on your radar?
Yesterday, Twitter deplatformed Dr. Robert Malone in yet another long line of scientists, doctors, and experts who've been silenced during this pandemic. Dr. Robert Malone is not an anti-vaxxer. In fact, he's taken the COVID vaccines, and he's spent his entire career developing and researching vaccines and treatments for pharmaceutical companies. Malone has served as a member of the Scientific Advisory Board of EpiVax, assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Medicine, an adjunct associate professor of biotechnology at Kennesaw State University. He was CEO and co-founder of a pharmaceutical company which helped in the development of the treatment for the Zika virus. He's a legitimate scientist and a doctor. And on top of this, most notably, Malone was an original inventor of mRNA vaccine technology. Now, many other scientists have built upon his work and have contributed to the advancement of the technology to get it where it is today. But Dr. Robert Malone was the first to come up with the idea and successfully test it. Now, in normal circumstances, he'd be someone we'd want to hear from during a global pandemic and during the development of vaccines for a novel virus. Other scientists might not agree with him, others might. There would be debate, as we'd expect there to be in science, but there's no doubt he's credentialed to speak and he's someone people would like to listen to. But Twitter decided otherwise and suspended his account. Now, it's clear we're not in normal times. These days, anyone, no matter how credentialed they are, can be silenced and, worse yet, smeared if they say something that goes against the higher-ups or the common belief. Numerous doctors, scientists, and experts during the pandemic have been the subject of character assassinations and defamation. It was once encouraged to get a second opinion when it came to our medical care, but now you need to go with the state-sanctioned advice, and anything other than that is a dangerous conspiracy theory. Shouldn't we, the people, be the ones to decide on that? Do you know what also was once a dangerous conspiracy theory? The idea that the Earth revolves around the sun rather than the entire universe revolving around the Earth. In fact, Galileo was convicted of heresy, which is the more ancient way of saying misinformation, and was deplatformed in the way they deplatformed people from the public square back then. He was sentenced to house arrest, where he remained until he died. This was how the powers that be could ensure Galileo's dangerous and untruthful ideas that the Earth revolved around the sun wouldn't be heard by the masses and cause confusion and mistrust in the government. There were many scientists who actually disagreed with Galileo's theory. Galileo was deemed wrong and dangerous, and so he was deplatformed and the subject of character assassination and defamation until he died. He was a quack, they thought. Good riddance. Now, we all know that wasn't true. The Earth revolves around the sun. It isn't disputed. But Galileo died without ever seeing the day he'd be exonerated. Now, we learn about Galileo in our history classes for a reason. He's a lesson to remind us that there are times when society as a whole, the elites, the educated, even the scientists are wrong. And worse yet, will shut down debate and wrongly persecute people. We often don't find out who is right or wrong until many years later, which is why it's important not to silence dissent. And maybe you're thinking, well, Twitter's a private company. They can do whatever they want. But it isn't just private companies that are doing this. It's also our government. A couple of weeks ago, emails from the NIH were obtained through the Freedom of Information Act request that exposed a concerted smear campaign against 3 well-respected scientists and epidemiologists. The issue was the Great Barrington Declaration. The authors of the declaration argued for a more focused approach in regards to controlling the COVID-19 pandemic. They argued for protecting the most vulnerable and allowing everyone else to resume mostly normal lives. They created a plan. They started meeting with government officials in the fall of 2020. But here's an email from Francis Collins, the director of the NIH, to Tony Fauci, asking for a quick and devastating published takedown of the declaration and the 3 scientists. The email reads, "Hi, Tony and Cliff. See gbdeclaration.org. This proposal from the 3 fringe epidemiologists who met with the secretary seems to be getting a lot of attention, and even a co-signature from Nobel Prize winner Mike Levitt at Stanford. There needs to be a quick and devastating published takedown of its premises. I don't see anything like that online yet. Is it underway?" 3 fringe epidemiologists? Okay, sure. If you think professors of medicine at Stanford and Harvard and an epidemiologist from Oxford are fringe, right? But shortly after this email, they ended up trading subsequent emails showing off their takedowns in the Washington Post, Wired, and The Nation. These are government officials. Why wasn't this allowed to be debated? Why was the public just told this was fringe, outlandish science to be immediately disregarded? We're now over 1 year later with the lockdowns, schools, closures, and other disruptions that don't look to be subsiding. discussing other ways to manage the pandemic are necessary at this point. It's actually fairly likely we end up going with the recommendations of these fringe scientists after all. Numerous credible scientists have been discredited, smeared, deplatformed, or fired, all without the ability for the public to debate their ideas and decide for ourselves who is a snake oil salesman and who isn't. Dr. Pierre Corey, who had his Senate testimony removed from YouTube. Gert Vandenbosch, a virologist who claimed vaccinating during a pandemic could be problematic. Dr. Aaron Kearty, an ethicist who said it was unethical to mandate vaccines. Dr. Simone Gold, who advocated for early treatments. The list goes on. Again, we might individually decide some are worth listening to while others aren't, but the shutting down of scientific debate is only going to facilitate the erosion of public trust in our leaders, government, and big tech. And that is something that, Robbie, I don't think Twitter really understands. And I know you mentioned this also on your radar yesterday, this kind of piggy tails or piggybacks on the, I always get my metaphors mixed up, piggybacks on the radar you did yesterday of this being defamation, and smearing. When you characterize someone as misinformation, then people, it gets on a Wikipedia page. People are like, oh, you can't trust that person. And it creates this, that person is Galileo. They need to be just shut down, silenced in some way. What Twitter doesn't realize, and my biggest beef with big tech on this, is they are causing, by doing all of this erosion in public trust. The public is becoming more and more skeptical as they see people with these big credentials being silenced. And they're saying, wait a minute, why would you silence that person? Or like you having your article being labeled as misinformation and removed. People that read you, they know you're a big author. You've been a writer for a while, that you are published in all of these big, publications. And then suddenly you're now misinformation. I mean, this is causing public erosion of trust in the government officials. Big tech is going to be largely responsible for that erosion. Our democracy is very fragile, and as we're seeing, and this is only going to spiral out of control, and it's going to be largely big tech that is responsible for it, as well as, and the thing that really bothers me, these emails, right? Yeah. Like, who were they calling? When Fauci and Collins got together and said, well, we need to have some published takedowns, what publications are they talking about? Who could they call? That needs to be investigated. What publications were they able to pick up the phone to? Apparently, Washington Post, Wired, and The Nation.
Yeah,
they were able to call up and say,
all of them in the mainstream media, whatever you want, Dr. Fauci, right? And that's what's so frustrating, I think, is the hypocrisy. Because, look, some of those scientists you've mentioned, I don't know everything that all of them think. I bet some of them have said some things or expressed some views that I think are wrong. But so have Dr. Fauci and Francis Collins and Rochelle Walensky, and the herd immunity prediction was wrong. The don't wear masks. Then, well, yes, you should wear masks. Now we think all masks except the K95 ones are useless. So the people who have credibility among the mainstream media, the government class, well, those people don't get silenced. They don't get kicked off Twitter. They don't get called fringed extremists. So, the government accepted, approved people are right about some things and they're wrong about some things. And so are all the people on your list. And so are you and I, and so is everybody.
Right.
So, labeling some people as like this other that cannot be trusted. These are the good people. These are the bad people. Everything they think is wrong. When people realize that is being applied selectively and it is not true, they lose faith entirely in the system. And that's bad, because there are some parts of the system that should be trusted. There's some advice that's been good, but people then they don't want to hear it because it's like the boy who cried wolf problem.
Yeah, it's been a very, very frustrating, this pandemic has been extremely frustrating and very exposing of our government, whereas other governments have handled this differently. Like Iceland, I often look at their data. They are so refreshingly transparent in Iceland. And, they say on their website when it comes to vaccination and COVID, they say, look, we don't know everything. We'll let you know as we know. They say this stuff can change. We're learning as we go. This is what we recommend right now. If something changes, we'll be the first to tell you. And it's like, why couldn't our government officials do that? Everybody has been wrong in this pandemic. Some have been less wrong than others. Everybody has been wrong, right? And yet, again, it comes down to this. Some people get labeled misinformation or fringe. I agree with your colleague that is doing the lawsuit. I almost want to join in on it myself.
It's docile, yeah.
Right. I think, a lot of us would say, hey, a lot of us were defamed in a lot of ways by being labeled misinformation. So because of a piece or a segment or something we said was labeled and flagged and removed or something. So, I don't think this is leading anywhere good, but I definitely would like to see that public debate. And it's up to me to decide who's the snake oil salesman, right? I might listen to something from some of these doctors and say, nah, but that's up to me, right? Why is Big Brother having to tell me, or the nanny
Famous
state?
snake oil salesman, Galileo.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will hear from Robbie, from you, your radar. Looking forward to that next.